Hürtgen Forest, November 1944. Private First Class Thomas Tommy Blackwood lay motionless in the frozen mud staring at a single broken twig. The twig was 3 inches long, snapped cleanly, hanging by a fiber of bark. It was the most important thing he'd seen in 3 days. Behind him, Baker Company was trapped, pinned down in a ravine by a German sniper who had killed 17 Americans in 72 hours. Officers, radiomen, medics. Anyone who moved got a bullet through the skull. The Germans called their sniper der Geist, the ghost. He never missed. He never revealed his position. Every attempt to locate him had ended with another body bag. Artillery hadn't worked, smoke screens hadn't worked. Counter-sniper teams had gone in and hadn't come back. Command was considering abandoning the position entirely, pulling back, accepting defeat. Then someone remembered Tommy Blackwood, the kid from Montana who'd spent his childhood tracking elk through wilderness that made the Hurtgen look like a city park. "The sniper's human," Blackwood said when they asked for his help. "Humans leave signs. Find the signs. Find the man." Now he was staring at a broken twig and his heart was pounding. Because this twig hadn't broken naturally, and the man who broke it was somewhere within 200 yards. The ghost was about to meet a hunter. The nightmare had begun 3 days earlier. Baker Company was advancing through the Hürtgen Forest as part of the broader American offensive into Germany. The forest was a death trap. Dense pine trees, deep ravines, and German defenders who knew every inch of the terrain. The company had pushed into a narrow valley when the first shot cracked through the trees. Lieutenant Morrison dropped mid-sentence. One moment he was pointing at a map. The next he was dead on the ground. The bullet had entered his right eye. The men hit the dirt. They scanned the tree line. They saw nothing. 20 minutes later, a second shot. Corporal Reyes trying to reach the radio to call for support. Dead before he hit the ground. The pattern established itself with brutal efficiency. Anyone who stood up died. Anyone who moved between positions died. Anyone who tried to determine the sniper's location became the next target. By the end of the first day, 7 men were dead. The survivors were pressed flat against the frozen ground, unable to advance or retreat. The Germans knew their sniper was working. They didn't need to attack. They just waited while der Geist systematically eliminated Baker Company 1 bullet at a time. Counter-sniper teams were dispatched on the second day. 3 experienced marksmen with scoped rifles trained specifically to locate and eliminate enemy snipers. 2 hours after they entered the forest, all 3 were dead. The ghost had killed the killers. By day 3, the situation was desperate. 17 dead. Wounded men unable to receive treatment because the medics kept getting shot. Morale destroyed. That's when Captain Morrison called for Tommy Blackwood. Tommy Blackwood had never wanted to be a soldier. He'd grown up on a ranch in western Montana, in country so remote that the nearest neighbor was 12 miles away. His father was a hunting guide who took wealthy clients into the wilderness to track elk, bear, and mountain lion. By the time Tommy was 14, he was a better tracker than most adults. He could read a forest the way other people read newspapers. A bent blade of grass told him which direction an animal was traveling. A disturbed patch of soil told him how long ago it had passed. The pattern of broken branches told him the animal's size and weight. His father taught him the first rule of tracking. Everything that moves through the wilderness leaves a trace. No exceptions. Even a ghost leaves footprints, his father said. You just have to know how to look. When the Army drafted Tommy in 1943, they recognized his skills. Immediately, he became a scout, not a frontline rifleman, but a specialist who moved ahead of advancing units, reading the terrain for signs of enemy activity. He'd spent 18 months in Europe tracking German patrols through French hedgerows and Belgian forests. He'd saved dozens of lives by spotting ambushes before they were sprung, but he'd never hunted another hunter before. When Captain Morrison explained the situation, Tommy didn't hesitate. "I need to get out there, into the forest, alone." Morrison shook his head. "The counter-sniper team went out there. They're dead. They were looking for a man with a rifle," Tommy said. "I'll be looking for the signs he leaves behind." "What kind of signs?" Tommy thought about it. He's been out there for 3 days. He has to eat. He has to drink. He has to relieve himself. He has to move to different positions. Every time he does any of those things, he leaves a trace. What if he's too good? What if he doesn't leave? What if he traces? Tommy smiled. The confidence of a young man who'd never failed at tracking. Everyone leaves traces. The question is whether you know how to read them. Here's what the counter-sniper teams got wrong. They were looking for a rifle, a muzzle flash, a scope glint, the obvious signs of a shooter. Der Geist was too good for that. He'd been hunting men for years. He knew exactly how to hide the obvious signs. But nobody can hide everything. Every human who moves through a forest disturbs it. Branches bend, leaves compress, soil shifts. These disturbances are tiny, invisible to anyone who doesn't know what they're looking at. Tommy Blackwood knew exactly what he was looking at. He was about to prove that the ghost wasn't a ghost at all. Tommy slipped out of the American perimeter at 400 hours, 2 hours before dawn. He carried his M1 Garand, but he didn't expect to use it. Not yet. His job wasn't to kill the sniper, his job was to find him. The others would do. The killing. He moved slowly, agonizingly slowly. A normal soldier would cover 100 yards in 2 minutes. Tommy covered the same distance in an hour. Every step was deliberate. He placed his feet on rocks, roots, firm ground, anything that wouldn't leave a footprint. He ducked under branches instead of pushing through them. He became part of the forest rather than an intruder in it, and he watched, not for the sniper, for the signs the sniper left behind. The Hürtgen Forest was a maze of pine trees, fallen logs, and dense undergrowth, perfect cover for a hidden marksman. But that same density meant movement was difficult. Even the most skilled sniper had to push through brush, step on soft ground, touch branches for balance. Each interaction left a mark. Tommy found the first sign at dawn, a patch of moss on a fallen log, slightly compressed. Someone had sat there. The compression pattern suggested a man of average weight facing east toward the American WWII positions. But the moss was recovering. The compression was at least 12 hours old. This was yesterday's position, not today's. Tommy marked the location in his mind and moved on. 2 hours later, he found the second sign, a small depression in the needle-covered ground, boot-shaped. The needles had been disturbed but were settling back into place. 6 to 8 hours old. The ghost was moving. He wasn't staying in one position. He was circling, approaching the American lines from different angles. Smart, unpredictable, professional, but predictable in his unpredictability. Tommy began to see the pattern. The sniper was moving clockwise around the American perimeter, changing positions every few hours, always staying within a certain distance, close enough for accurate shots, far enough to disappear. If the pattern held, his current position should be to the northeast. Tommy adjusted his approach. It was mid-afternoon when Tommy found it. A single broken twig, pine, 3 inches long, snapped cleanly, not gradually bent and split by weather. The break was fresh. The sap at the break point was still sticky, not yet dried by exposure to air. Someone had broken this twig within the last 2 hours. Tommy froze. 2 hours meant the sniper was close, very close. He lowered himself to the ground with glacial slowness, pressing his body into the frozen needles, becoming invisible. Then he studied the twig. The break angle told him the direction of pressure. Someone had pushed through here heading northeast. The height of the break, from about 4 feet off the ground, suggested a man of average height moving in a crouch. But here was the crucial detail. The twig was from an interior branch, not the outer edge of the bush where anyone might brush against it. The interior. Only someone reaching into the bush would break an interior branch. Why would a sniper reach into a bush? Tommy's mind raced through possibilities. To retrieve, to something, to hide something. He looked more closely at the base of the bush. The needles were disturbed, not from footsteps. The disturbance was too localized. Someone had placed something here, or retrieved something they'd placed earlier. A cache. The sniper had supply caches hidden throughout the forest. This was how he operated for 3 days without returning to German lines. He'd pre-positioned food, water, and ammunition. He was living in the forest like a predator, and Tommy had just found one of his hiding spots. If the cache was here, the current shooting position couldn't be far. Snipers stayed close to their supplies. Tommy began a careful spiral search, moving outward from the bush in an expanding circle. 50 yards out, he found another sign, a scrape mark on tree bark, shoulder height. Someone had leaned against this tree and their equipment, probably a rifle sling, had scraped the bark. The mark was on the side facing the American positions. Tommy looked up. The tree had a thick lower branch about 15 feet up. The branch was easily climbable. From that height, a sniper would have a clear field of fire over the American ravine. He'd found the shooting position. But was the sniper there now? Tommy didn't look directly at the tree. Snipers watched for eyes, for the distinctive forward-facing gaze of a predator. Looking directly at a sniper's position was often the last thing a man ever did. Instead, Tommy used his peripheral vision. He kept his eyes on the ground, his head down, while his peripheral awareness scanned the tree. At first, he saw nothing. Then, movement. Tiny, almost imperceptible. A slight shift in the shadows where the thick branch met the trunk. Someone was there. Tommy's heart hammered. He was 50 yards from a man who had killed 20 people in 3 days. If the sniper saw him, if he suspected anything, Tommy would be dead before he heard the shot. He had to mark the position, without being detected. Slowly, Tommy reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small piece of white cloth, a bandage from his first aid kit. He dropped it. The cloth fluttered to the ground, landing on the dark needles. Visible, obvious, but only if you were looking for it. Now he had to get back to American lines alive. Tommy began his withdrawal, moving even slower than before, never looking at the tree, never giving any sign that he'd found anything. The forest seemed impossibly loud. Every rustle of needles sounded like a gunshot. Every creak of frozen branches sounded like a sniper's rifle being raised. But no shot came. 1 hour, 2 hours. Tommy slipped back through the American perimeter as the sun was setting. He went straight to Captain Morrison. I found him. The strike team moved out at 300 hours. Tommy led them, using the route he'd mapped during his approach. 6 soldiers moving in total silence, following his exact path through the forest. They reached the white cloth marker just before dawn. Tommy pointed at the tree. The soldiers spread into a semicircle, rifles raised. "You're sure he's there?" one of them whispered. Tommy studied the tree in the pre-dawn darkness. The shadows hadn't changed. The branch was still occupied. "He's there." The squad sergeant made the call. No negotiation, no attempt at capture. 6 rifles fired simultaneously. The tree erupted in splinters and flying bark. The soldiers emptied their clips into the branch, then reloaded and fired again. When the echoes finally faded, they approached the tree. A body lay at the base. It had fallen from the branch, struck by multiple rounds. German uniform, scoped rifle, a face that looked almost peaceful in death. In his pack, they found a journal. 23 confirmed kills recorded in neat handwriting. Dates, distances, descriptions. The ghost was dead. Der Geist had been killed by a tracker who noticed a broken twig. Baker Company was able to move again within the hour. The siege was over. After 3 days of terror, the survivors could finally evacuate their wounded, recover their dead, and continue the advance. Captain Morrison pulled Tommy aside. "How did you know? How did you find him when nobody else could?" Tommy thought about it. Everyone else was looking for a sniper, a rifle, a muzzle flash, the obvious things. What were you looking for? A human. Humans leave traces. It doesn't matter how good he was. He still had to move through the forest. He still had to touch things. He still had to exist in the physical world. And the twig? Tommy smiled. The twig told me he had a cache nearby. The cache told me he was operating from a fixed area. The fixed area meant his shooting position had to be close. Everything connects. Morrison shook his head. 17 men died because we didn't have a tracker sooner. You have one now, Tommy said. For the rest of the Hurtgen campaign, Tommy Blackwood was attached directly to regimental headquarters. Whenever a sniper threatened American operations, Tommy was dispatched to find them. He never failed. The principles Tommy used didn't originate in World War II. They came from thousands of years of human hunting experience. The knowledge that every living thing leaves traces. The understanding that observation beats firepower. Military snipers today are taught the same principles, just in reverse. Modern sniper training emphasizes counter-tracking. How to move without leaving signs, how to eliminate traces, how to exist in an environment without disturbing it. The best snipers study the skills of trackers like Tommy Blackwood, specifically so they can defeat those skills. But the fundamental truth remains unchanged. Nobody can eliminate all traces. The sniper who thinks he's invisible is the sniper who gets killed. Der Geist believed he was a ghost. He believed he was untouchable. He forgot that even ghosts leave footprints in fresh snow. And he forgot that somewhere in the American lines there might be a hunter who knew how to read the snow. Tommy Blackwood survived the war. He went home to Montana and took over his father's guide service. He spent the next 40 years tracking elk, bear, and the occasional mountain lion through the same wilderness where he'd learned to read the forest. He rarely talked about the war. When people asked about his service, he usually changed the subject. But sometimes, late in the evening, he'd tell the story of the broken twig. Everyone was looking for a ghost, he'd say. I was just looking for a man who had to move through the forest like everyone else. A man leaves signs, always. You just have to know what to look for. The German sniper had killed 20 people with his rifle. Tommy had killed him with his eyes. Because sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a gun. It's the ability to see what nobody else can see. A broken twig. 3 inches long. The end of a 3-day nightmare. If this story of observation, patience, and the oldest hunting skills defeating the deadliest technology gripped you, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel uncovers the untold stories of World War II, the unconventional solutions, the overlooked heroes, and the moments when ancient wisdom beat modern warfare. Tap the bell so you never miss an upload, and drop a comment below. I want to know, could you have spotted the broken twig or would you have walked right past it? Share this video with someone who appreciates real military history. And check out the video on screen right now for another story of unconventional warriors who changed the war. I'll see you in the next one.